Chapter 1. People tend to reveal what matters to them without ever saying it directly. You see it in how effort flows, in who gets patience and who gets irritation, in who receives softness by default and who has to earn basic courtesy. Nobody wakes up planning to be disrespectful to someone they genuinely admire. It just doesn't happen that way. Disrespect shows up when attraction is lukewarm, when interest is conditional, when someone is tolerated instead of chosen. That's a pattern you've seen 100 times if you've been paying attention. Even if you never named it out loud, you can watch it play out in everyday interactions. A woman speaks gently to one man and sharply to another. She laughs at things from one person that would annoy her coming from someone else. She's patient when one guy messes up and instantly critical when another does the same thing. Same behavior, different response. The difference isn't mood. It isn't personality. It's valuation. Who she likes determines how she treats you long before rules, conversations, or expectations ever enter the picture. Most men ignore this because they're focused on their own desire. They see a woman they're attracted to and start working backward, trying to make the situation functional after the fact. They tell themselves, things will smooth out once she gets comfortable, once she knows me better, once she sees what I bring. That's where the mistake happens. Comfort doesn't create admiration. Familiarity doesn't create respect. If the baseline attraction isn't there, everything else becomes labor. And labor is exhausting when it's one-sided. You've probably noticed how easy things feel when someone actually likes you, not just enjoys your presence, but really likes you. You don't have to repeat yourself. You don't have to chase cooperation. You don't have to manage tone or tiptoe around moods. Things flow, not perfectly, but smoothly. When something needs to be done, it gets done. When something bothers you, it's received instead of resisted. That ease isn't magic. It's interest doing the heavy lifting for you. Compare that to situations where you feel like you're constantly negotiating, asking twice, explaining why something matters, correcting the same behavior over and over. Feeling like basic respect requires effort. That's not because relationships are hard. It's because the foundation is wrong. You're trying to build structure on top of indifference, and indifference doesn't hold weight. It collapses under the smallest pressure. A lot of men tell themselves that love grows over time, and sometimes that's true. But liking doesn't start from zero. Liking is either there early or it isn't. And when it isn't, everything else you do feels like convincing. You're not partnering. You're campaigning. You're trying to earn a position that was never offered freely. That effort might buy compliance for a while, but it won't buy enthusiasm. And without enthusiasm, resentment creeps in quietly on both sides. You can hear it in how men talk about their relationships. They say things like, she doesn't listen, she doesn't care, she always has an attitude. And when you strip those complaints down, they all point to the same thing. She doesn't like you enough. Because people don't act that way toward someone they value. They just don't. Nobody disrespects someone they're genuinely impressed by. Nobody talks crazy to someone they admire. That's not how admiration behaves. What makes this hard to accept is ego. It's painful to admit that someone you chose doesn't really like you. It feels better to believe she's difficult or traumatized or just needs time. Those explanations protect your pride. They let you stay invested without questioning your selection. But the cost of protecting your pride is paying with your peace. And peace is expensive to lose. The truth is, choosing someone who likes you changes the entire dynamic from the start. You're not pushing, you're not persuading, you're not trying to be impressive every day. You're simply existing, and that's enough to receive goodwill. From there, everything else becomes easier. Cooperation feels natural. Contribution feels voluntary. Agreement feels genuine. You're not managing a relationship, you're participating in one. Most men never experience this because they're taught to pursue what they want, not to evaluate what wants them back. They chase chemistry, beauty, excitement. They overlook alignment. They skip the most important filter and then wonder why everything feels uphill. Chemistry without admiration creates friction. Attraction without respect creates conflict. Desire without liking creates imbalance. And imbalance always shows up eventually, no matter how much you try to ignore it early on. You can tell when a woman genuinely likes you by how little resistance there is to your presence. Not blind obedience, just ease. She wants to be around you. She wants to contribute. She wants to please you without feeling diminished by it. That willingness isn't weakness, it's interest. And interest is the engine that makes relationships function without constant maintenance. When interest is missing, everything feels forced, even the good moments. This is where a lot of men get stuck in denial. They say all relationships require work, so they normalize struggle. They convince themselves that difficulty equals depth, that if it's hard, it must be meaningful. That's backwards. Meaningful relationships have friction, but they don't feel like resistance at every turn. Work is required to grow something healthy. Struggle is required when something isn't aligned. There's a difference, and your nervous system knows it even if your mind keeps arguing otherwise. Think about how you treat people you like. You're more patient, more forgiving, more willing to compromise. You don't need them to prove themselves constantly. You want to make things easier for them because their presence matters to you. That's not something you decide intellectually. It's automatic. That same automatic response is what you should be looking for in return. If it's not there, no amount of communication will install it later. There's a single story that captures this better than theory ever could. A man dates two women at different points in his life. With the first, everything feels like effort. He plans, initiates, adjusts, explains. She responds inconsistently. Sometimes warm, sometimes cold. He spends a lot of time trying to understand what went wrong. With the second, things are simple. She shows up, she supports, she responds positively to his direction. He feels respected without having to demand it. The difference wasn't the man, it was the woman's level of interest. One liked him enough to make life easier. The other didn't, no matter what he did. Most men experience both scenarios but misinterpret them. They think the second relationship worked because they were more confident, more mature, more successful. Those things help, but they're not the core factor. The core factor is selection. Choosing someone who already values you instead of trying to convert someone who doesn't. That choice alone determines whether your relationship feels cooperative or combative from day one. Once you understand this, you stop tolerating certain behaviors without even thinking about it. You stop explaining disrespect away. You stop arguing with patterns. You stop telling yourself that being talked to a certain way is normal. It's not normal when liking is present. It's only normal when liking is absent. That realization doesn't make you bitter. It makes you precise. You stop wasting time trying to turn indifference into admiration. If you're listening to this and recognizing dynamics you've lived through, sit with that recognition. Don't rush to defend past choices. Don't rush to blame anyone either. This isn't about fault. It's about awareness. Awareness changes outcomes without drama. If this chapter is already shifting how you think about selection, hit like on the video, not because it's comfortable, but because it's clarifying. In the next chapter, we'll talk about why men ignore this filter so often, how desire clouds judgment, and how to tell early whether someone actually likes you or just enjoys what you provide. Chapter 2. You can feel it when desire starts doing the thinking for you. It's subtle at first. You notice how quickly you overlook things you'd never tolerate from anyone else. You catch yourself rationalizing tone, excusing inconsistency, reinterpreting indifference as mystery. None of that happens because you're stupid. It happens because wanting someone turns down your internal volume. Your standards don't disappear. They just get quieter. And the quieter they get, the more room there is for behavior that would normally set off alarms. Most men don't realize how much desire distorts perception because it doesn't feel like distortion. It feels like optimism. It feels like hope. It feels like giving someone a chance. Those are all socially approved words, so the mind wraps the behavior in something that sounds mature. But underneath it, something else is happening. You're prioritizing how you feel about her over how she treats you. And once that order flips, everything downstream gets harder to manage. You've seen this play out in yourself or in men close to you. A guy meets a woman he really wants, and suddenly his tolerance stretches. He waits longer for replies. He accepts excuses that don't make sense. He laughs things off that actually sting. When you ask him about it, he says it's not a big deal, that he's just being patient, that she's busy, that she's different. None of those explanations hold up under time, but they hold up long enough for him to get emotionally invested. And once he's invested, it's harder to admit the truth without feeling foolish. This is where men get trapped, not because they chose wrong initially, but because they keep choosing wrong after the evidence shows up. They confuse effort with commitment. They believe that if they just do more, things will balance out. That belief feels noble, but it's backwards. Effort should be a response to mutual interest, not a substitute for it. When effort is trying to compensate for a lack of liking, it turns into a performance. And performances are exhausting to maintain when the audience isn't impressed. There's a moment that usually gets ignored early on. A small interaction that doesn't sit right. Maybe it's a dismissive comment. Maybe it's a lack of enthusiasm. Maybe it's a subtle disrespect wrapped in humor. In that moment, your intuition speaks quietly. It doesn't scream. It just notes something. And instead of listening, desire jumps in with an explanation. She didn't mean it. You're overthinking. It's too early to judge. Those explanations feel reasonable, so you accept them. But intuition doesn't stop speaking. It just gets overridden repeatedly until you stop hearing it altogether. Men who've been through enough relationships recognize this pattern instantly when they see it again. Not because they're bitter, but because repetition teaches faster than theory. They've watched how skipping the liking filter leads to the same outcome regardless of how different the woman seems on the surface. Different personality, same result, different story, same ending. That's when they stop romanticizing chemistry and start paying attention to behavior. Not grand gestures, small, consistent indicators of interest. One of the clearest indicators is how much resistance exists around doing things that benefit you. When someone likes you, they don't need to be convinced to contribute. They might not do everything perfectly, but the willingness is there. When liking is absent, even small requests feel like negotiations. There's pushback, delay, friction. You start feeling like you're asking for too much when you're actually asking for basic cooperation. That internal confusion is a signal, not a flaw in you. A lot of men internalize that confusion and turn it inward. They wonder if they're too demanding, too rigid, too controlling. That self-doubt keeps them stuck longer than anything else. It shifts the focus away from the original question, which was whether she genuinely liked them. Instead of evaluating her interest, they start evaluating their own worthiness. That's a dangerous pivot. Because once your self-worth becomes the variable, the relationship dynamic tilts permanently out of balance. You don't have to be perfect to be liked. You don't have to be exceptional. You don't have to be impressive all the time. Liking isn't earned through flawless execution. It's felt. It's either there or it isn't. And when it's there, imperfections don't threaten the connection. When it isn't, no amount of perfection can create it. That's why men who try to optimize themselves for someone who doesn't like them end up feeling depleted. They're chasing an outcome that isn't available through effort alone. There's a quiet relief that comes when you stop trying to be chosen by someone who isn't choosing you. That relief doesn't come from winning. It comes from stopping the internal tug of war. You stop asking why things feel off. You stop replaying conversations. You stop planning how to say something just right. That mental space opens up, and in that space, clarity returns. You remember what mutual interest feels like because you're no longer numbing yourself to the absence of it. Men often ask how to tell early whether a woman actually likes them or just enjoys the attention. The answer isn't in her words, it's in her behavior when there's no immediate reward. Does she show up when it doesn't benefit her directly? Does she adjust when something matters to you? Does she invest without being prompted? Those behaviors don't come from obligation. They come from genuine interest, and they show up early before routines form and expectations get blurred. When you ignore those signals, you end up in relationships where everything feels like a transaction. You do something, then wait to see if it's reciprocated. You say something, then analyze the response. You start keeping mental tallies. That's not connection, that's accounting. And accounting kills intimacy because it replaces trust with vigilance. The moment you feel like you're constantly monitoring the balance, something foundational is missing. It's important to understand that choosing a woman who likes you doesn't mean choosing someone who lacks standards. It means choosing someone whose standards include you. There's a difference. She can be selective. She can be strong-willed. She can be independent. None of that conflicts with liking you. In fact, when someone like that chooses you, the respect feels deeper. Because it wasn't automatic. It was deliberate. Many men never experience that dynamic because they're chasing validation rather than alignment. They want the woman everyone else wants. They want the ego boost. They want to feel chosen by someone who feels out of reach. That desire makes sense, but it comes at a cost. Validation fades quickly. Alignment endures. When validation is the goal, you tolerate misalignment because the reward feels immediate. When alignment is the goal, validation becomes secondary because peace lasts longer. You can see the difference in how conflicts are handled. In relationships built on genuine liking, disagreements don't threaten the bond. They're addressed and resolved because both people want harmony. In relationships built on imbalance, disagreements escalate because one person feels expendable and the other feels replaceable. That tension doesn't go away with communication. It's baked into the dynamic from the start. If this chapter is stirring recognition rather than resistance, pause there for a moment. Recognition means you're seeing patterns clearly, not defensively. That's progress. If this resonates, share it with someone who keeps blaming themselves for dynamics that were never mutual to begin with. In the next chapter, we'll explore how men can recalibrate their selection process without becoming closed off, bitter, or guarded, and how choosing differently doesn't mean settling. It means aligning. Chapter 3. There's a quiet recalibration that happens once you stop confusing selection with settling. Most men think those two things live on opposite ends of the spectrum. Like, if you stop chasing what excites you, you're automatically lowering your standards. That fear keeps them locked into cycles that don't serve them. What actually happens when you recalibrate is the opposite. Your standards sharpen. They stop being cosmetic and start being functional. You're no longer asking whether someone looks good next to you. You're asking whether life gets easier or harder with them present. This is where a lot of men misunderstand what choosing differently really means. They imagine it requires shutting down attraction, becoming rigid, or emotionally unavailable. None of that is true. Recalibration isn't about killing desire. It's about putting desire back in its proper place. Desire becomes something you observe, not something that drives the vehicle. When desire drives, you overlook signals. When you're driving, desire becomes one data point among many. That's a very different experience. You start noticing things you used to miss. Not dramatic red flags, but subtle tells. How quickly she adjusts when something matters to you. How she responds when you're tired instead of impressive. How she behaves when there's nothing to gain. Those moments reveal alignment more clearly than chemistry ever could. And the strange thing is, once you start valuing alignment, attraction doesn't disappear. It changes texture. It becomes calmer, steadier, less frantic. You're not chasing the feeling anymore. You're assessing the fit. A lot of men worry that this mindset will make relationships boring, that without intensity, things lose spark. That's another illusion created by imbalance. Intensity often comes from uncertainty, not compatibility. The highs feel high because the lows are looming. When things are stable, the nervous system relaxes. And when the nervous system relaxes, you experience connection differently. It's not dull. It's grounded. You're not constantly bracing for the next shift in mood or interest. That steadiness allows deeper attraction to form over time. There's also a subtle confidence that emerges when you choose someone who genuinely likes you. You're not wondering where you stand. You're not guessing. That certainty changes how you show up. You speak more freely. You're less defensive. You're not performing. And that authenticity is often more attractive than the performance ever was. Ironically, by stopping the chase, you become more appealing because you're no longer seeking approval. You're offering presence instead. Men who've recalibrated often notice that conflict feels different too, not absent, but cleaner. When someone likes you, disagreements aren't power struggles. They're problem-solving moments. You don't feel the need to assert dominance or withdraw to regain control. You address the issue and move forward. That efficiency feels foreign at first if you're used to chaos masquerading as passion. But once you experience it, it's hard to go back. There's a temptation at this stage to swing too far in the other direction, to become overly guarded, to scrutinize every interaction, to test people instead of simply observing them. That's not recalibration. That's armor. Armor might protect you temporarily, but it also blocks connection. The goal isn't to become unreachable. It's to become discerning. Discernment is quiet. It doesn't announce itself. It just notices patterns and responds accordingly. You don't need a checklist. You don't need to interrogate someone's intentions. Time reveals everything when you're not rushing. Interest shows up in consistency. Liking shows up in effort that isn't negotiated. Respect shows up in tone, even during disagreement. When those elements are present, you don't feel like you're constantly proving yourself. You feel met. And being met is different from being admired from a distance. It's warmer, more human. One of the biggest shifts happens internally. You stop needing to be chosen to feel validated. That doesn't mean rejection stops stinging, but it stops defining you. You understand that someone not liking you isn't an indictment of your worth. It's information about fit. That understanding frees you from trying to win people over. You're no longer auditioning, you're selecting. That role reversal changes the entire dynamic of dating and relationships. Men often underestimate how much peace comes from alignment. Peace doesn't announce itself, it sneaks up on you. You realize one day that you're not anxious, you're not checking your phone constantly, you're not replaying conversations. That absence of noise is the clearest sign you chose well. It's not fireworks. It's silence where chaos used to be. And silence in this context is a gift. If you're listening and thinking about past situations where you ignored your own discomfort because attraction was loud, don't turn that into regret. Turn it into data. Experience only becomes wisdom when you extract something from it. You don't need to punish yourself for past choices. You just need to choose differently next time. If this chapter is helping you reframe what selection actually looks like, take a moment and share it. Not as advice, but as perspective. In the next chapter, we'll talk about how usefulness and agreeableness fit into this framework without turning relationships into transactions or hierarchies. Chapter 4. Usefulness gets misunderstood fast, especially in conversations like this, because people hear it through a transactional lens. They think it means tallying favors or reducing a relationship to utility. That's not what's being pointed at here. Usefulness in this context is about contribution to momentum. It's about whether someone adds to your life's direction or quietly drains it. Every person in your life is either helping you move forward or slowing you down. That's not cynical. That's observational. You feel it in your energy long before you articulate it in words. When someone genuinely likes you, usefulness shows up naturally, not because they're trying to earn a spot, but because alignment creates cooperation. They want to help because helping feels like participation. They don't ask what's in it for them every time because they see themselves as part of the larger picture you're building. That mindset can't be negotiated into existence. It grows out of respect and interest. When those are missing, requests feel like burdens and contribution feels like sacrifice. A lot of men avoid thinking about usefulness because they've been conditioned to believe wanting support is weakness. They're told that real men handle everything alone. So when a woman does very little, they convince themselves that's normal. They accept minimal effort and call it independence. Meanwhile, they're carrying the emotional, logistical, and directional weight of the relationship alone. That imbalance doesn't show up immediately, but it compounds over time. And when it does surface, it feels like burnout rather than conflict. Agreeableness gets tangled in the same misunderstanding. People hear that word and think submission or lack of personality. That's not what it means here either. Agreeableness is about how easily someone can work with you. It's about whether disagreements become wars or conversations. It's about whether someone looks for solutions or looks for leverage. An agreeable person doesn't erase themselves. They choose harmony when it matters. And harmony is impossible when ego is constantly in the room. You can see the difference clearly in how problems get addressed. With someone agreeable, issues don't linger. They're brought up, discussed, and resolved. There's movement. With someone disagreeable, everything becomes a standoff. Even small things turn into tests of power. You feel like you're always negotiating peace rather than building something. That friction isn't passion, it's incompatibility pretending to be depth. Men who skip the liking filter often end up overemphasizing usefulness later because they're trying to compensate. They start asking for more, pushing harder, setting rules they never needed before. That creates resentment on both sides. She feels controlled. He feels unsupported. The relationship turns into a constant correction cycle. That cycle isn't solved by better communication. It's solved by better selection. You can't retrofit alignment after the fact without a lot of pain. There's one story that captures this shift cleanly. A man spends years with someone who looks good on paper, but makes everything harder. He's constantly explaining himself. He's constantly adjusting. He feels drained, but tells himself that relationships are work. Later, he meets someone who genuinely likes him. The difference isn't dramatic at first. It's subtle. She listens. She follows through. She supports without being asked. Over time, he realizes he has more energy, more focus, more peace. Nothing magical changed. He just stopped swimming upstream. That story isn't rare. It's common. What's rare is men actually trusting it when they experience it. Many sabotage it because it feels unfamiliar. They mistake calm for lack of chemistry. They miss the adrenaline of uncertainty. That's conditioning, not intuition. When you've been used to chaos, stability can feel strange. But strange doesn't mean wrong. Often it means healthier than what you're used to. Usefulness also isn't static. It evolves as life evolves. Early on, it might look like emotional support or logistical help. Later, it might look like shared responsibilities or strategic thinking. The key is willingness. Someone who likes you is willing to adapt with you. Someone who doesn't like you resents adaptation because it feels like loss. That difference becomes obvious when life applies pressure, not when things are easy. Agreeableness matters most when stakes are high, when stress hits, when plans change, when expectations collide. That's when you see whether someone wants partnership or dominance. An agreeable person doesn't need to win every interaction. They care more about outcomes than ego. That doesn't mean they never push back. It means they pick their moments intentionally. That intention keeps relationships functional under strain. Men often worry that prioritizing usefulness and agreeableness will turn relationships into checklists. It doesn't if you've already filtered for liking. When someone likes you, these traits don't feel like requirements. They feel like natural extensions of care. You're not asking someone to be useful. They want to be. You're not demanding agreeableness. It's already there because respect is present. The mistake is reversing the order. Looking for usefulness before liking. Looking for compliance before interest. And that creates dynamics where people perform temporarily and resent permanently. Performance fades, resentment lingers. That's why so many relationships collapse after the honeymoon phase. The underlying interest was never strong enough to sustain cooperation once novelty wore off. If this chapter is landing, you're probably noticing how many past situations could have ended earlier with less damage if you'd paid attention to how much someone actually liked you. That realization isn't meant to harden you. It's meant to refine you. Share this with someone who keeps confusing difficulty with depth. In the final chapter, we'll tie everything together and talk about how choosing women who like you, are agreeable and genuinely useful, doesn't make life smaller. It makes it lighter. Chapter 5. And lighter is the word most men don't expect. They think choosing differently will feel restrictive, like they're giving something up, like life gets smaller when standards get clearer. What actually happens is the opposite. Life gets quieter in the right places. The noise drops off. The constant low-level stress of wondering where you stand, of managing tone, of anticipating conflict, of bracing for disrespect, that all fades. Not because you found perfection, but because you stopped inviting friction into your daily life. When you choose a woman who genuinely likes you, who works with you instead of against you, who adds to your direction instead of questioning it at every turn, something subtle but powerful shifts. You stop negotiating your own authority. You stop feeling like you need to justify your expectations. You stop shrinking parts of yourself to keep the peace. And the peace that replaces that isn't fragile. It's stable. It doesn't depend on mood or validation. It's rooted in alignment. A lot of men don't realize how much of their identity has been shaped by managing dysfunctional dynamics. They've built resilience around chaos. They've learned to stay calm in environments that shouldn't require constant calm. So when things finally become smooth, there's an adjustment period. Silence can feel strange. Ease can feel suspicious. You might catch yourself waiting for the other shoe to drop. That's not intuition. That's conditioning wearing off. This is where maturity shows up, not in how much you can tolerate, but in how quickly you recognize what you no longer need to tolerate. You don't have to announce it. You don't have to lecture anyone. You just move differently. You choose differently. You don't chase what complicates your life anymore, no matter how attractive it looks on the surface. That restraint isn't repression. It's discernment earned through experience. Men often ask what happens when you finally find a woman who likes you, is agreeable, and is genuinely useful. The honest answer is that nothing dramatic happens. And that's the point. Your life doesn't turn into a movie montage. It turns into something sustainable. You get more done. You think more clearly. You have more emotional bandwidth. You're not constantly recovering from interactions that drain you. You're building instead of repairing. There's also a deeper respect that develops for yourself, not the loud kind, the quiet kind that shows up in how you make decisions. You stop second-guessing your instincts because you've seen what happens when you ignore them. You stop explaining yourself to people who don't need to understand. You stop arguing with reality. That internal alignment creates external confidence without effort. People feel it, not because you're trying to project anything, but because you're no longer leaking uncertainty. This is where many men finally understand that relationships aren't supposed to be constant tests of endurance. They're not meant to be puzzles you solve through suffering. They're meant to be environments where your best qualities have room to breathe. If you're constantly in survival mode emotionally, something is wrong. And the solution isn't more toughness, it's better selection. You don't need to become colder to do this. You don't need to become suspicious or closed off. You just need to slow down enough to observe patterns instead of getting swept up in feelings. Feelings aren't enemies, they're signals. The mistake is letting them override information. When attraction and information are aligned, life feels coherent. When they're not, you feel torn internally. That internal conflict is a warning sign, not a challenge to overcome. Choosing a woman who likes you doesn't mean she worships you or puts you on a pedestal. It means she values you. It means she treats your time, your energy, and your direction with care. It means she doesn't see cooperation as submission or contribution as loss. She sees herself as part of something that's moving somewhere. That shared movement is what makes relationships feel purposeful instead of draining. Over time, this choice compounds. Your days feel lighter, your decisions feel cleaner. Your goals feel more attainable because you're not fighting battles at home. You're not distracted by unnecessary drama. You're not emotionally depleted before you even start your day. That stability doesn't make you complacent. It frees you to be more ambitious because your foundation isn't shaking. There's a quiet confidence that comes from knowing you're wanted, not tolerated. That confidence doesn't need to be proven. It doesn't need to be defended. It just exists. And from that place, you naturally expect more. Not out of entitlement, but out of alignment. You stop accepting good enough because you've experienced what better actually feels like. And once you know that feeling, it's hard to unlearn it. If you think back across this entire video, from the first observations about how people reveal what they value, to desire clouding judgment, to recalibration, to usefulness and agreeableness, it all points to one simple truth. Life reflects the standards you enforce through your choices, not the ones you talk about. You don't get the relationship you deserve. You get the relationship you select and maintain. This isn't about becoming rigid. It's about becoming honest with yourself, honest about what you want, honest about what you're willing to live with, honest about the difference between attraction and alignment. When you're honest at that level, decisions get easier. You stop overthinking. You stop hoping things will change. You stop trying to be liked by people who don't see your value. You start choosing environments that already do. If this series of chapters has shifted how you think about selection, about liking, about usefulness, about peace, take a moment and like the video, not as agreement with every word, but as acknowledgement that clarity matters. Share it with someone who keeps confusing effort with compatibility. And as you move forward, remember this quietly. The right choice doesn't feel exciting all the time. It feels sustainable. And sustainability is what builds a life you don't need to escape from.